I mentioned earlier how US President Joe Biden will attend the Queen's funeral, but what about the wider response in the US? I spoke with Kristin Tate, columnist with The Hill, and I asked her earlier about the public reaction there.
Of course, it's been overwhelming, Chris. First of all, thanks for having me on. Yes, it's been a very overwhelming week here. And once again, we see this split between, the actual public and their response to her passing, and then, these left-wing ideologues in the media that don't necessarily represent the views of the vast majority of people. I mean, what did the Queen represent? She represented traditionalism, dignity. She was a woman of God. And most of all, she represented Western civilization and the British Empire, which brought so much good to the world. And so people here really mourned her passing because it's like the passing of an era. But then you have these ghouls who work in left-wing media who took her death as an opportunity to slander not just her, but the British Empire as a whole, and to make these political points that had nothing to do with this incredible woman and her incredible legacy in life.
Yeah, there's been plenty of that in Australia too, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But first up, let's have a listen to your President Joe Biden, who actually quoted the Queen when he was at a commemoration to the 21st anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks. Have a look.
I remember a message sent to the American people from Queen Elizabeth. It was on September 11. Her ambassador read a prayer of service at St. Thomas Church in New York, where she poignantly reminded us, quote, "Grief is the price we pay for love. Grief is the price we pay for love." Many of us experienced that grief, and you've all experienced it.
Joe Biden there quoting the Queen. And of course, Kristin, he'll be heading to London for the funeral. And officially, at least, the United States appreciates that link to Britain, notwithstanding a war of independence and all the rest of it. All the traditions, all the institutions, all the history it shares with Britain.
Of course, it's a very special relationship. I mean, the British gave the world the Magna Carta. They helped end the transatlantic slave trade. They gave us free speech. They brought Protestant Christianity to the world. I mean, this is such a special relationship between our two nations. And I don't agree with President Joe Biden on so many things, but I'm glad that his administration is showing respect to this incredible woman upon her passing, and not using her death to make political points like so many others are right now.
Yeah, indeed. And you mentioned the left-wing media, of course, CNN prime among them in the US. I want to show you a clip here of Christiane Amanpour, one of their lead anchors, and she seems to think the British and the royals are the root of all evil in the world and should be making reparations. Have a look.
The wealth of this empire was derived on the back of the people of their empire.
On display in the palace.
Right, on display everywhere, and in the crown and everywhere. So what we're saying is that there is the generation of multicultural and diverse Britons who want this answered, who want to see their monarch finally talk about what it means and what, potentially the idea of reparations, definitely justice, right? Justice.
It's extraordinary stuff, isn't it, Kristin? They're talking about reparations and the damage. No talk about democracy, the rule of law, prosperity, and all the other things that the British Empire has actually shared around the world.
Exactly. These people should be ashamed of themselves. They are so predictable and partisan that they can't even be classy for a few days after Queen Elizabeth dies. Was the British Empire perfect? No, but it was more humane than any other ever. And Queen Elizabeth was the last living link to a truly great Britain. But what's going on here, it's not about Queen Elizabeth. These partisans, it's not about her. It's about their hatred of Western civilization. And it is so ironic, Chris, because as they are sitting there making these despicable comments, they are basking in the wealth and the fruits of Western civilization that they themselves enjoy. They are just so predictable, so partisan. I don't think a lot of people really listen to this nonsense that they're spouting, but it has been disappointing that they can't even wait a week for Queen Elizabeth to pass gracefully and for everyone to pay their respects before jumping in and making these partisan points. But I guess that's what we expect now from these people.
We sure do, but Kristin, this actually leads me to another topic which essentially is unrelated. It comes to domestic US politics and border security, because the point is, the real judgment when it comes to Western liberal democracies, of course, is the fact that people vote with their feet. People want to get to countries like the UK, like Australia and like the US. And there was astonishing news this week that the total number of illegal immigrants crossing the Mexican border into the US over the past year looks like topping 2 million people, which is a record and is astonishing. Of course, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is supposed to have some responsibility for this. Have a look at her answer to questions about this.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
Kristin, how can you call it a secure border when 2 million people are crossing it illegally?
It is such a joke, Chris. I live down in Texas. This state is completely overrun. You mentioned that 2 million figure. That's just a portion of it. Those are just the people getting caught. So you have the people coming across, getting caught. A lot of people are turning themselves in willingly because they know that they'll just ultimately get released and they can disappear into the system. But there are a whole lot of others who do not get caught. We are basically importing new U.S. cities to this country every couple of months because of the number of sheer people who are being let into our wide open border. It is causing an insane amount of destruction. Down here in Texas, where I am, you can't go to an emergency room without waiting hours because they are flooded with illegal immigrants. The schools here are completely overcrowded. Crime is out of control. There are drugs everywhere. It is becoming like a third world country in many parts of Houston, the city that I live in. And what makes me just roll my eyes is that the governor of Texas, the state where I live, has started actually busing a lot of these illegal immigrants up to liberal cities that say they love illegal immigrants. They want to be sanctuary cities. And now you have the leaders of those same liberal cities like Washington, D.C., screaming and saying, oh, this isn't fair. We don't want them here. They're trying to call in the National Guard. They don't want them. They want them all in red states and conservative places like Texas. It's got to stop. We have got to secure the border. But this administration has shown no appetite to do it. And Vice President Kamala Harris is completely useless.
It's a shocking situation. Thanks again for catching up with us, Kristin. Appreciate it.
Thanks as always, Chris.